I want to make one point about 1945. In the pensioners movement, I'm the General Secretary of the National Pensioners Convention. In the pensioners movement, large numbers of people were there and saw 1945, and even if they were only teenagers or, in my case, 10 years old, it had a huge impact. We have to think, well, what do we take from that? A lot of people are going around saying that they didn't have any money then and yet they did it. But it wasn't like that. There was a huge movement. It was a mass movement coming back from the war and joining with others who had been organising themselves in the factories, going into their trade unions, many women who hadn't before done that. And they joined together and they said, we're not going back to the 1920s and 30s. And this was such a huge movement that the defeated Winston Churchill had to go over to the United States and organise a loan in order that the Labour government could actually put through the welfare state. Now let's learn from that side of what happened in 1945 and not just keep saying they didn't have any money and yet they did it. They didn't have any money, but they had a huge movement and it put the fear of Christ into the ruling class. And it wasn't just here, it was all over Europe. All over Europe, plans were being laid and people weren't scared of saying socialism. And I think today that you've got in the pensioners movement many people who remember that and are very anxious to take up the struggle. So I want to say this to you. When you organise your local campaigns, make sure that you include the pensioners. You won't be able to include them like a lot of people in this room, because many of them have got hearing problems, hip problems and all the rest of the things that go with old age. But don't leave them out. If you've got a meeting in the evening, go to their local group and see if you can help them with a car to take people down to it and let them speak and let them take up these questions, because in the pensioners movement it is the memory of the struggle. They not only went through that, they went through Thatcher very consciously. Many lost their jobs, many came out of the engineering industry because they were closed down, manufacturing was closed down, and a lot of the people who are now coming into the National Pensioners Convention around the country are people who had paid in for 30 odd years into a pension, an occupational pension, and then in their 50s they lost their jobs, they were made redundant, and now they're coming into the pensioners movement without the backup of an occupational pension for this measly 98 quid that we get on the state pension. So don't forget those things. Now, just about the National Pensioners Convention. When we received the statement, the President, Frank Cooper, who's a leading member of the Labour Party in London, and myself, who isn't, decided that we would definitely sign up. Now that caused some waves inside the National Pensioners Convention, because they said, oh, but there were some real problems in Greece, you know, somebody died, and there are these sort of things we've got to be careful of, and haven't we got to approach the people who are in the pensioners movement who are in the sort of middle England? Well, interestingly, we're having loads and loads of people who've been in the Liberal Party for 30 years who've slung in their cards, and they're in the wilderness, they say, and they don't know where to go because they can't anymore back up what is happening. So this so-called Middle England, we shouldn't be, well, I know you lot aren't, but in the pensioners movement, it's not a party political organisation, and we are treading on different ground perhaps when we're organising. But to wind up, on the 10th of April this year, the National Pensioners Convention initiated a large demonstration in London. Some of you might have taken part in it. We were told by the police that there were 10,000 people on this demonstration, but we organised it together with the trade unions, and that committee of the trade unions and the National Pensioners Convention continues and exists. And we brought up at the last meeting the coalition of resistance and suggested that everybody should sign up to it. There are various things going on, like the 20th of October, when we're going to have a demonstration. I don't think it'll be huge unless you make it huge, but we're talking about having at least a small demonstration and and a photo opportunity on the day when they announce their cuts. We're also going to take part in the ETUPU demonstration in Brussels on the 27th, isn't it, of September, 29th of September, and on the 27th of October we have our own lobby of Parliament, and people are welcome to come along on that. We'll get it on the website. I think that when we had our executive committee of the National Pensioners Convention on the 7th of September, I will be putting forward in my report to that executive that this campaign should be supported, and it shouldn't just be that Frank Cooper and I have signed up to the statement. And I think we're going to get a big support for this, and I think that we're going to be able to take the National Pensioners Convention onto a new plane. For too long, I think that it has been, if you like, the sort of hanging on to the coattails of movements, just keeping itself dealing with the state pension and nothing else. Today, pensions are a huge, huge issue, and we are joining with the trade unions and going on all the picket lines where workers are fighting for their pensions. So I'm very pleased to be here. I'm going to take a report of this meeting to the NPC, and I hope that you won't forget the NPC and its local organisations when you're organising locally. Don't forget, they're slow, they found it difficult, but they do have meetings and they do want to join in. Thank you.